brauche noch Internet. Okay. Hello and welcome to my presentation about infrastructure as a code with Ansible in Azure. Last month I did one of this certification in Azure, and for me personally it's better to do something practical to learn the stuff. And so I ordered my own Azure account to create some VMs over the GUI and read tons of documentation on the Microsoft page. And then I saw that Ansible offers a lot of models for Azure. And so one thing leads to another, and I created by Ansible a small environment. And today I give you a short introduction. So my name is Andrin Linki. I live with my family in Zurich, near the Uetliberg. That is on the other side of the town. Since almost 2 years, I extend the team at KMG Group with Magnus together. During my leisure time, I playing floorball, ride my mountain bike, and try to skateboard. My other hobby is to make my home smarter. That is not always so popular in my family, especially when the coffee grinder starts when someone pushes the light on. But that is another story. I'm using Ansible since over 5 or 6 years in different projects. The first contact with Ansible I have on a big telecom company that we make the migration from an outsourcing in a cloud environment. And last year I automated the deployment of Sirius. I have some talks already with some guys that know Sirius. Sirius is a core insurance application. And my current project is infrastructure as a code to deploy a full stack application triggered by pipeline. Yes, I mentioned before, I'm working for KMG Group. We are a small group of IT enthusiasts, and we are helping our customer to automate the deployment of application, configure system, or automate also operation stuff. Some of us working from Switzerland, and some of us are working from Sweden. And Magnus, as already said, he's the donator for the beer today, so thank you for that. The evolution of Ansible is amazing, isn't it? I think for me, Ansible was mainly known as a tool to deploy software, configure system, templating stuff. And for deploying infrastructure, often I use a GUI from a cloud provider, or a bash script, or sometimes Terraform. But since the last years, Ansible becomes more popular when the discussion comes into infrastructure as a code. Ansible supports the 3 big cloud providers, AWS, Microsoft Azure, and also Google Cloud. And I think the combination of this tool set with the application system and the infrastructure as a code generates benefits. So first you are able to deploy a full stack from the infrastructure to the system and end it with the application. Second, knowledge. So in the team you have to know only one technology. That's also a benefit, I think. And it is easier to deploy a multi-cloud environment or a hybrid environment. So of course you have to use different models, but for example you can share the variables you have already defined. And this is a screenshot of the Azure module. For me it's really interesting that Microsoft itself developed that models. And they offer more than 270 models. Quite impressive, I think. Let me allow to do a side note. I know some of you are VI hackers, but personally I need some more comfort for my development environment. So I use Visual Studio Code. And I'm working in different projects. I need different Ansible version, different collection installed, or also some libraries or other dependencies. And I don't like to install everything what I need on my Mac, because 1 month later you don't need it anymore and your hard disk is full or fuller. So I created for every project my development container in Visual Studio Code. And I think that is also mentioned, or worth to mention, how I solve it for my demonstration. So I will show you first the Docker file. I use it for that demonstration. So maybe... das sieht man gar nicht. Schade. Too small. Okay, here you have the JSON file for the development container of Visual Studio Code. Here I can say I want to use a Docker file to create my environment. I have also the possibility to do a post create command after the container is built. Here I use it to add credentials that I use later in the demo on a specific place. And also, I have also added an extension for code highlighting with Ansible. And then the Docker file is called. That looks like this. I use Python. So I install a specific Ansible version. And here a collection for Azure. Also the requirements first, and then a specific Azure collection. And also the Azure framework for the API of the Azure. And then some other stuff. So, good. So that is an approach with that development container that works for me quite well. So maybe you have other solution for that problem that is common, I think. So then go back to the topic. To allow Ansible to deploy infrastructure in Azure is straightforward if you know what you have to do. So first I will show you the theory, and after that I show you in the GUI what you have to do. First you have to create an enterprise application. The enterprise application will represent the Ansible. And then you have to create an application secret that could be, for example, a certificate or a token. In my demo, I will use a token. And Azure use role-based authentication. So yeah, I have to find a suitable role for Ansible. In my case, I use the role contributor that is already placed in Azure. With that role, I'm able to create, delete or update resources, but I'm not able to change permission. And finally, you have to add the information to Ansible. That could be provided as environment variable or in a specific file. That is that file you have saw it in the Docker file. So jump into the portal. Ich muss das wieder zumachen. Okay, or you need a bigger? Okay, good. Okay. Let's start here. So in every Azure subscription, or yes, in the subscription you have the Azure Active Directory service. And here you have the possibility to do an app registration. So we do a new registration test. Or demo. And that is okay. Then the second step is to create the client credentials. So I will add a secret. That takes 3 months. Okay. So that was the second step, yeah. And now I have to assign a role. And the role assignment I'm doing that usually on the subscription level. So then you can also do it on a resource group or on a different kind of group. So I go to the access control, and then I have to add a new role assignment. As I mentioned before, contributor, it's okay for me. Then I select the member. Demo Ansible. Select review contributor, the right role, and the right member. So now Ansible is allowed to deploy resources in Azure. So let's have a look what is the demo about. Everything that is green that would be deployed by Ansible, and the prerequisite for this demo is to have an Ansible account and a subscription. And for a resource group is a group of is a logical group to group some different resources. Every resource or every item or service has to be part of one resource group in Azure. Good. So let's jump into the code. So now I will start my development container. that it is already done. So it's built up before. When you do it the first time, of course, it takes a little bit longer, but I have tried it before. I run first the Ansible playbook because it takes some time to deploy the virtual machine, and afterwards I go to the code. So that is running now. So first the group wars. I have here my resource group name. So then the resource group name will be KMG demo. I will deploy all resources to Switzerland North. Then the virtual network, the name is here, address space with the subnet. I also going to create a security group to allow SSH, and here are the information for my demo host. Yes, forgot to say, the main goal of the demo would be to create a virtual machine with access over HTTP and also SSH. So let's see the playbook that is running now. So first I will create the resource group in the specific location, create a network group, the virtual network, and as you can see, I have on every item or on every task, I have to say in which resource groups I want to have my resource. So I create it once, and then everything goes in this group. So the network with the subnet, I also created a public IP address to get access, and also a debug message, so that I can connect from outside. Then here is the security group to allow SSH. For now, we will afterwards extend it with the HTTP port, network interface, and finally the virtual machine. I choose the smallest size with 1 CPU and 1 gig of RAM, but for this purpose it's enough. I also add the Azure user with an SSH key. So it's still creating. Let's have a look in the portal. Resource group. So the KMG demo is already existing. You can see what is done. So we have the demo host, the virtual machine that I've created with the playbook. Then the storage account that belongs to the demo host. Also the network interface, the security group to allow SSH, my public IP address, and the virtual network. So okay, it is done. Now I want to try connect over SSH. Yes. So I'm connected. So for that demonstration, I have implemented or I deployed CentOS. Okay. Ansible offers, or Azure offers, a dynamic inventory. So when you use the dynamic inventory, you will always have the inventory that is really deployed in Azure. So you have not the problem that the deployment and the inventory file will differ. So with the dynamic inventory, you have always the truth. you have the possibility to two groups. I had it now two groups. One is a conditional group when a CentOS is deployed, so I guess it's a Linux system. And I always also have keyed groups with the application role. We will that see in my demonstration. So let's go back to the code. So I jump out of the Azure VM. So now I want to add a tag to my virtual machine. So that is the task where I create a virtual machine, and now I want to add a tag. It's not the same than tags in Ansible, so be aware of that. Application role. That would be in the end a web server, so it gets the role web server. Okay. Before I run that playbook, I will show you first the inventory. So now I take the information from Azure itself, and I can see, okay, I have the KMG demo host, and it's part of the Linux group. And now I can rerun the playbook again. And now it's also interesting. Now you can see it only will change the virtual machine. Everything else is green, so nothing changed here. So the network, it's the same. Just the virtual machine will update it. And it's important. We had with another cloud provider that problem, the problem that when you change something that was with Terraform, not with Ansible, but when you change something, the whole virtual machine was deleted and recreated. But that is not the case with Azure. You can just change it. We'll have a short interruption, for example, when you change the size, but it will be the same virtual machine. So now create VM is changed. Now we want to extend the inventory file. Now I want to have a group with the web server. So I added keyed groups. And the key would be tags and my application role. So I rerun the graph to show or to see if I have any spelling mistake. Luckily not. So now the KMG demo host is part of the web server. So the last step of my demonstration would be to install an Apache server. For that I have to also extend the security group to allow port 80 that we can connect and see if the Apache is running. So that it's here, this is my first rule for the SSH connection. I'll do a copy of that. Name HTTP, protocol TCP is okay, port 80, priority 1 below, okay. So then I rerun the playbook. So now I expect that only the security group has a change. Okay, here's the change. Everything else should be the same. Good. Then to install the web server, I have also a playbook, of course. That's really simple. Just define the private key for the SSH connection. I will use the created Azure user to connect over SSH. Then I will install HTTPD, make a custom index, and in the final step, I will enable the service. So, and what I always do before I run the first time the playbook, I add list host. That is just for safety reasons. I don't know how many of you changed something by accident. So KMG demo host, yeah, that is the host that we want to change. So let's do it. Take some time because it's not the fastest virtual machine I deployed. Only one CPU, 1 gig, but it's okay. Here we go. So I need the IP address, the public IP address. So maybe if someone else will test it with the mobile, it should also work. So that's it. Hello, Ansible Meetup. Okay. When I finished my demonstration, I will run this playbook. That is quite simple because I have used the same resource group for all my deployments. And now I can just say which resource group. I say it's state absent and I force delete. So when I run this playbook, everything is gone. Before I will do that, has someone questions about it?
So you don't need to empty it, you just...
Yeah, just you need to add the force delete. Otherwise, he will complain that it's not empty. That could be dangerous.
I'm not sure if you use thoughts OpenStack. I think you can't do that there. So you use networks manually.
Okay. Okay.
Do you create always the entity with a unique password, or is it always the same user with the same password for everything?
That is just a demo case. So in a real environment, you will have other users.
How do you do that?
How do you do it for the other environments which not are in demo, which are in production? How do you organize all these users which are accessing other environments without the same password?
Okay. Yeah, with the SSH keys. So, for example, you have always to have an Ansible user that has the access to all the system they have to deploy something. So it's the main purpose.
Thank you.
Other questions? Please wait for the mic. No.
Okay. Yeah. Otherwise, I have to pay it too much. So that is the end of my presentation. If you have further questions, we can have a discussion over a beer or ping me at LinkedIn anytime. Thank you.
Fabrik.
Brauchst du noch das da, oder?
Okay. Welcome to our presentation about LFOps, managing a RHEL-based data center using Ansible, which is inspired by DevOps. Let's start with us. Who has heard of us before, Linux Fabric? Quite a few people, yeah, nice. For the others, let me introduce myself and Linux Fabric quickly. My name is Navid Sassan, and I've been with Linux Fabric for 4 years by now, and I do Linux system administration and anything else that comes up. Linux Fabric was founded 2016 by Markus Frey and Sandro Lang. We are located in Zurich, currently have 5 employees, and do everything connected to open source and Linux, and provide enterprise support for both of those. Basically, we're a helping hand for IT departments if they don't have enough resources, or need expertise that they themselves don't have, we provide that. Starting point, how we started with Ansible. We have a lot of environments to manage, since we have different customers at different data centers, different locations, and doing that manually would be insane, so we use Ansible. Basically, from the beginning, Linux Fabric always used Ansible to manage the environments. At the start, we had 2 playbooks, an application and the basic setup playbook. The basic setup did basic things like configuring SSH keys, opening, closing ports, changing ports, basic things. And the application playbook then installed the applications such as HTTP, Apache, or anything else the customer really wanted. There are a few problems with this. We had quite an adventurous playbook. We made a new one for each customer, so we had to make customizations to each. This one customer didn't have an Apache, that one did. So after a while, they differed from each other, and everybody was different, which wasn't the goal of Ansible at all. The roles didn't do enough, which meant that at the end, we still SSH to the server, and manually changed something which wasn't documented or was documented somewhere, but then you ran Ansible again and it was back to the old state, and the customer complained because that wasn't what they wanted. And then we had some roles which were special. They didn't conform to the other roles, did too much, too little, just didn't fit in the picture. Also, changes were very hard to track and revert. If somebody changed something in a role, it was hard to see who did what, when, where. Yeah. This led to old environments differing from newer ones, because the older ones weren't maintained. They were just set up using Ansible, but they weren't maintained using Ansible. All in all, we designed it wrong from the startup. So at some point, coincidence helped us. While researching a completely unrelated problem, we stumbled over DevOps. DevOps is first commit 2014, and has 280 contributors and is your Debian-based data center in a box. That's their advertisement. I see nods, probably some of you have heard of it before. It's a set of Ansible playbooks and roles that enable you to manage a single server or a whole Debian-based data center, and promise you to do that simply. They're proven to work. Many people use them. They're popular on GitHub with over 190 roles. And they showed us that generic playbooks and roles were possible to achieve. And maintaining your data center using Ansible was possible in quite a simple way in the end. But DevOps itself wasn't suitable for us. It only supports Debian, and we have a varied consumer base, very different distributions. It wasn't very intuitive to use. They have a wrapper around Ansible itself. It isn't what we used to know. And it was hard to develop new roles for it. And we would have to conform with their contributing and their style. We shortly considered porting all of DevOps to RHEL, because that's what we mainly focus on. But in the end, that was too complex to actually pull off. Yeah. So instead, we started with LFOps. LFOps is a collection of playbooks and roles, similar to DevOps. But it reduces the need for the sysadmin to go to Ansible Galaxy, take a role, adjust it to their needs, and then use that. A few differences from DevOps. The first, being obvious, is that we focus on RHEL more instead of Debian, because 95% of our customer base is RHEL-based. Some of the roles still work with Debian and Ubuntu, but our focus is on RHEL. Then the next thing is we try to incorporate our best practices as security into the roles, which means they come with sensible defaults. For example, Nextcloud, an application, is provided with object store, that is S3 or Swift in the as a backend instead of local files. We do hardening by default, some tuning by default, and try to be CIS compliant, the Computer Institute compliant, by default as far as possible, especially for the Apache HTTPD. We also try to use modern crypto settings where possible, just sensible defaults, so the admin has to change as little as possible to get a secure and good setup. And we don't use userland tools. Ansible is good enough for us. Ansible Playbook, we know how to use that, and that works for us. The goal is that not only we install using Ansible, but also maintain onwards the VMs using Ansible. So if there's a change requested, we also do that via Ansible, and we don't connect via SSH and change something locally on the VM. SSH should only be for troubleshooting in case you have to figure out what the problem is, but the fixing in the end should be done via Ansible. This also means that if the VM breaks at some point and we need to redeploy it, we know the state of the VM is in the Ansible inventory, you can redeploy it, and that's it. So we developed over 100 roles that are designed to work with each other. So if you run the Apache and then the application afterwards, we did that too. We know that they work with each other. And yeah, we have sensible defaults. The other advantage is that it's open source on GitHub. It's an Ansible collection with the new collection standard. And this is very transparent for our customers. They can go to GitHub and see how their VMs are actually managed. Let's have a look at a few technical things we do to achieve this goal. And so firstly, everything is based on host groups. This is a concept that we took from DevOps. So basically, if you want to deploy an application, you just put the host into the group. For example, if I want to deploy WordPress on my server 42, I simply put the server into the group and then run Ansible Playbook with the path to the inventory and Linux Fabric LFOps and the setup WordPress. This is the playbook that is already in LFOps. the playbook goes to the host group and runs on all hosts that are in there. And this gives you a finished WordPress installation. You basically only have to set variables if you need to modify it. The next point kind of ties into the first one. The playbooks are read-only for the user. This means that you don't have to adjust anything in the playbook. Everything is managed via host vars. For example, if you want to skip a role, we have a playbook which installs Docker, for example. And for that to work, we have a role before that, which is called repo Docker, which deploys the repositories for Docker itself. But let's say our customer says, no, I already did this step. I have satellite or some management of repositories. We don't need that. I still want to use this playbook, but then I can set the Docker skip repo Docker variable on that host in the environment, and this role is skipped. The advantage of this is that it increases consistency. We don't have a playbook per customer anymore. We have playbooks for purposes, applications. And if something is skipped, that is documented. It means there's a line in the inventory somewhere where it says skip this, hopefully with a comment or with a git commit that explains why this was skipped for that customer. But that also shows us we are using it, and that also shows us who did it, when it was done, and hopefully why it was done. Yeah. And it also means that exceptions are easy to find. For example, if you want to know, who doesn't use our repository or this Docker repository, we can simply do a grep over the inventories for this variable, and we see all of those hosts don't do it or do it. The next thing is dependency injections. Our stance is that one role should manage one applications or one responsibility and shouldn't interfere with other applications. For example, when you have a WordPress role, that should simply install WordPress and shouldn't do any Apache vhost or any database management. For that, we have the own roles. But the problem now is the WordPress role still knows I need a database and a user with those permissions, and we don't want to manually put that in the inventory every time. So what happens is the WordPress role injects that in the playbook to the MariaDB server role, for example. It tells the MariaDB server role, I have a list of databases that I want you to create, and I have a list of users that I want you to create. And then the playbook runs from the top to the bottom. The MariaDB server creates the database and the user, and in the end, the WordPress role uses those. This is also ties into the Ansible defaults. We try to create databases and users with the least privileges, and we don't remember what the least privileges are for WordPress, but LFOps does. So we don't have to touch that. The next feature is supporting different OS flavors. This is maybe a little more basic. We try to still be as generic as possible, and we are forced by RHEL itself because there are different versions. RHEL 7, 8, 9 behave differently. So we have to have different tasks and variables on the role level for different OS flavors and OS distributions. And we also have to differ on the playbook level. Sometimes a role only doesn't make sense on Linux, for example, and not on Windows. For example, repo EPEL only makes sense on Red Hat, not on Debian, and on the version 7 and 8 currently. And the monitoring plugins repository only works on Linux, so we exclude everything that is Windows, for example. The next thing is that we sometimes need to support different versions of the same applications. Two prominent examples here are MariaDB, where there's version 10.3, I think, to 10.6, or 8 currently. And PHP, where we have version 7, 8, and the subversions. The problem there is that especially MariaDB has different defaults for each version. So MariaDB 10.1 has different defaults for a variable than 10.2. And we still need to deploy both of them because the customer didn't want to upgrade, the application requires it, whatever. So Ansible needs to be able to handle those. How we are doing that is, first of all, we dynamically determine which version is actually installed on the system. we don't use a variable which could be outdated, but we actually check which version is installed. Then we use this version to load the defaults file for that version. So we have different defaults for 10.3, 10.4, 10.5, which are applied depending on the version on the system. Same thing for PHP and a few other applications where it's relevant. Then the next thing is that we use raw configs. Sometimes it's just too complex to actually show all of the logic of the application in Ansible variables. One of the examples for this is Apache. It's basically impossible to make a nice Apache role which exposes all variables that Apache has for the user to edit in a YAML file. So what we do there is we provide a template or a few templates for common use cases. For example, we have a reverse proxy template which has a few variables in it, but mostly given structure, and an application server template which has the same thing for an application server, but we also allow the user to input raw Apache config into those, or to create a completely own config file from the inventory. So this is a snippet from the inventory for a host, where I want to config for the vhost example.com with exactly this content. And I can simply insert this in the host inventory, and this will then be deployed as an Apache vhost. This makes role development more manageable, since we don't need to invent an abstraction layer for all of these variables. We also don't need to document all of these variables, because most admins who handle HTTP Apaches already know them. And it prevents us from over-engineering the whole development, and it means that we can develop the roles relatively quickly, because we can say this is the line. Until there, we provide user-friendly input, and if it's more complex, more complicated, we still allow the user to input raw strings to the application. Of course, all of this is, again, version controlled in the host inventory, so you still know who did what where. The next point is more user-facing. We have standardized READMEs for each role. So when you look at our list of roles, you see, oh yeah, there's an Apache. How do I use this? The entry point should be the README. We spend about the same development time on the README as on the code itself, because in our experience, the README is as important, because when you use it, you don't want to read the whole code again. You want to read a short, concise README where it tells you what options do you have, what do you need to do, what should you do, and what can you do if you need to. So all of our READMEs should contain all the necessary information, hopefully, and have the same structure. A heading with the full qualified name, mandatory requirements, what do you actually need to do for this to work, minimum. Optional requirements, what could you do or what could you potentially want to do to improve this? For example, for MariaDB, install the repository from the company itself instead of using the RHEL repositories, so you get a newer version. That will be in this section. Then tags, just a short list of Ansible tags that are available with a short description, what they do and why you should use them. And then the mandatory role variables, what do you need to set in the host inventory for this role to work? For example, password for a MariaDB server, you don't want that to be automatically set. You want to be forced to set that. This prevents accidentally deploying a server where the password is password or test or whatever. And then a usually longer list of optional role variables. What can you further customize? For example, MariaDB, how many connections does it accept? An Apache vhost, things that you potentially want to change via Ansible, but that aren't mandatory. Then all of this is tied together with strong conventions. In our contributing, we have an extensive contributing file where we document for ourselves and others what to pay attention to when developing a new role. And we have very strong conventions because we want to keep the roles as similar as possible. We want to keep the READMEs as similar as possible. that improves maintenance later on. For us, it's easy if we decide to change a heading in the README. It's easy because we know that they're all called the same. We could just do a search and replace, for example. If we need to adjust something over all the roles, it's also easy because we know they all have the same basic steps, basic structure. And we treat all the YAML content, so the roles, the host vars, everything, the playbooks as source code, which means they're under version control. We work with them as carefully as you would with an actual source, open source project, application. The variables are the API for us, towards the user, which means we try to avoid changing variable names randomly. We have conventions how to name a variable, so they hopefully don't change. Because if we change the variables, you need to change all the host inventories as well. And if somebody else uses our roles, they have to do the same thing. We also keep a change log for this purpose. So if somebody is using our roles, they can follow the change log and see, oh, I have to change this and this and this for this to work again. To summarize, it's hard to write good Ansible roles and general use Ansible roles, but we still try to make them as generic as possible and to cover as much of the customizable options that we can. We also try to cover different operating systems. We don't exclude Debian only because we didn't test it on Debian. We have a list in the README that tells you what we have tested the role on. But if you look at the code and you think this works for Debian as well, you can use this for Debian. We have customers that also use Debian, so certain roles are tested on Debian, Ubuntu. Yeah. And yeah, we try to be as generic as possible as far as we can. The roles are used every day by us and a few different other enterprises that also rely on them. So they're actually used in production. It's not just a hobby project. They are tested and they work for us. And everything with sensible and secure defaults to alleviate as much work from the sysadmin. We try to do as much as possible for the sysadmin. Yeah, that's the link for everybody who's interested. And I think that's already it. Thank you for your time and attention. And if you have any questions, you can ask them now, or we can talk later. And I'm happy to show you details for the interested. Yeah.
Wait a second.
So, do you also have like automated testing with GitHub actions and stuff for your roles, or?
No, currently not.
Okay.
We are planning to do that, but we are still migrating our old roles to the new LFOps, and we are not yet at the point where we have automated testing for it. But we still use them every day, so it's not like they're unused.
Oh, no. No, thanks.
Other questions? Don't be shy.
Where are the variables defined? Is there only in the inventory or group vars, or how do you handle that?
Generally, how we do this is we have one inventory per customer because we have many different customers, and few of them also have access to their Git repository, so it has to be separated. And then, as much as possible, is in the group vars to avoid repetition of variables, and then the custom stuff for the host itself, for example, the IP, the username, whatever, is in the host vars itself.
Okay, thank you.
Just wanted to comment a bit on DevOps, a slide you showed, because we're using DevOps and we're using in a kind of similar style. You're using your thing, so it's quite easy to use DevOps without the DevOps command line tools. We do that, and we also only use selected roles. So we are kind of migrating to use it as a collection. It even supports collections. And one thing I was wondering when you showed your README was, did you consider using the same mechanism DevOps uses to generate the documentation? Because what I like there is that the documentation is in the defaults file. So you can either look at the file directly or the rendered website, and it's the same.
That's one of those things where we thought that it's too complicated, but maybe we will change our mind on this in the future. But in our opinion, it made the defaults not very readable with all of the added syntax and comments where you had to write it a certain way for it to be machine readable in the end. So we decided against that. But we are seeing the use case of automated readmes too, so maybe we'll change our mind on this in the future.
Okay, nice. And one thing you didn't show, I also especially like about the DevOps way, is that they have each variable which applies to it, mostly lists and ticks, on different levels, say defaults, group, and host. Do you do that as well?
Yes, we also do that.
Okay.
That is basically the requirement for the dependency injection. That's how that is achieved in the end. So there is one, for the people who don't know DevOps, there's one variable which you can use in groups, which is called Apache vhost group var, for example. And there's one variant which you can use in host inventories, Apache group vhost host var, for example. And then in the end, the role takes both of them, combines them, and uses the combined result to actually run the role. So for example, if you define all of my hosts in this group need to have the user Linux public, and this host also needs to have the user GitLab. In the end, this is combined, and both of the users are created for that host.
There was another question somewhere.
I have one quick question. Are you using role argument specs?
Sorry?
Are you using role argument specs?
What's that?
It's I don't know when exactly it was introduced, maybe Ansible Core 2.11 or 2.12. You can basically have an argument spec for a role where Ansible automatically does some validation.
Okay.
And it also allows you to show the documentation for the role in Ansible doc.
No, but it sounds very cool.
Yep,
So yeah, we'll have a look at this.
cool. Thank you.
What's the biggest environment you run that on? How many hosts are you managing with this?
Hard question. I'd say around 100 or 120 hosts in one environment. Just a customer where he has a lot of hosts that he monitors. So we deploy a lot of monitoring agents and different plugins on those.
Last chance. If not, thank you very much for the very interesting presentation. So I hope you're still okay for the last presentation, which will be Pascal Stauffer from Confirm. No, not Confirm anymore. I'm wrong. Sick, he's sick. Stick.
Yeah. Are we ready? What else? Okay. So, yep. Whoa. A good start in the presentation. So, yeah, I'm a bit nervous. I don't speak so often for so many people, and especially not in English, so I hope you're kind with me and have a bit of, are nice with me. So I will talk a bit about some Ansible hacks. I don't know what was a good title to my presentation or my talk, so I called it hacks, but mostly of the advanced user will already know what I will talk about right now. But I hope there are also some beginners and you have something that you can learn from my talk. Yeah, first of all, I will just make a short introduction in some Ansible commands. I think most of you already know them, but I will show you some options and maybe also one or two binaries that you not all already know. And just a quick reminder, I don't have slides or many slides. I will work on the console. This is just for reference, so I can upload the presentation afterwards, and you can just use my links to the official documentation. So if you want to know something a little bit deeper, just use my presentation and the links. So yeah, I can switch to my console. That's what I like. So first of all, I want to show you the Ansible inventory command. I think Andrin, where is he? Yeah, already showed some of it. It's a quite simple tool and can be used to just show you your inventory in a graphed way on all your structure. I have here a simple inventory file with some groups. Is it good for the size? Then I have two children groups or two parent groups, St. Gallen and Zurich, and another parent group called Switzerland. And with the Ansible inventory command, I can just show my inventory as graph. So I see the whole structure. The all is the default group that is always created by Ansible. Then under that, I have the the Switzerland group, and on the same stage, I have St. Gallen and Zurich, and as children, I have the group 1 and group 2 with my 2 hosts inside. So that's quite simple. What I also can do is I can filter it on a group. So if I have a big inventory and I don't want to see the whole graph, I just can add a group name, and so I see the structure based on that parent group that I added here. What's also possible to use the option host, so I can add a host name here, and then I see the host and group bars that are suitable for that host. So here I have some group vars set. Here my var is in the group 1, then I have the location, the count, and another location in my group vars. And so these are my group var files, and with the host option, I just can see all my variables that are valid for my host. Then the last one is also with the Ansible inventory. With the list, I can see also the structure with all the groups and children's. Oh, sorry. And here I also see the host vars for all hosts. So if you have something that you want to know about the host or your inventory with the host vars, you can use the list command. That's it. That's the Ansible inventory command. Another useful command could be Ansible console. I don't know if some of you know that. With Ansible console, I can just, here I can limit the console on some groups. If I can also use all. So my command and my module that I will run on all. Here I'm now in the console with 4 nodes. Then I can just use ping, so the ping module will run on all that hosts. I can also use commands. The default module that will be used if I don't add a module is the command module. So here I can use the command, and the command will be executed on all the hosts that I have in my limit. So I can here go back and say, okay, I want something run on my group 1. Okay, I have to deploy a simple file, simple content of a file. Test temp Ansible meetup.txt. So now I just created 2 files on the same host. It's my MacBook, but yeah, here I just created a file, and if I make a cut on that file that I just created, you see the content for my lab 1 and my lab 2 host. Yeah, here you can run all your modules that Ansible knows. So I can use debug, hello Ansible Meetup. So quite simple. The next one is some options for the Ansible playbook command or binary. I think all of you already know the binary, but sometimes there are some options that can be useful in the daily work life. So Andrin also used a command that I also often use is the list tasks. Oh, you used a list host. List host is also on my list, so I can start with list host. With list host, you see all the tasks and the place in my playbook, and on which hosts the playbook would be run. So here I have my play 1, which will be run on the Zurich host group, and Zurich contains the 2 hosts, lab 3 and 4. So here I have no task. You see, no task for this. Oh, sorry, no, you don't see the tasks. You only see the hosts. And here I have a limitation with a quite complicated host pattern. So maybe you don't see if I just open here I have my host pattern for the playbook. So here I don't know on which hosts would that playbook run. So it's quite useful to use the list hosts. And here then I see, okay, that pattern for the playbook matches on the lab 2 node. And if I would use tags, I would also see the tags. But for that, it's maybe easier to use the option list tasks. And here you see all the tasks that will run in my play and playbook. Here I have, for the Zurich host group, I have 2 tasks, debug and copy, and also the tags that are available for that task. Another option that can be useful is step. With step, you run, or Ansible asks before a task is executed, Ansible asks you if the task should be run. So here, the first task is default gather facts. So I don't want to gather the facts, so I say no. The next task is debug location. I say yes, okay, I want to run that task. The next one is I want to copy a file. I say no, thanks, I don't want that. Then the next play, gather facts again. Okay, here I want to continue. Continue means all the other tasks or the following tasks will run to the next play. Not the whole playbook, to the next play. So if I have more than one play in a playbook, the continue means it will run my 2 tasks in the play 2, and the last task, the last play is already starting with my steps, and I can say here, okay, no, thanks, and that's it. That can be useful sometimes for debugging something, or yeah, just to make sure, okay, I want step by step to run my playbook. Then I think most of you already know the option check and diff. Check can be used to not run something on the host. It's just a demo or a no operation mode for the playbook. And a good combination can be here to use it with the diff. be sure you cannot use diff. If you use diff without check, the playbook will run. That can be sometimes a bit confusing. So if check and diff are something different. Check will not do something, and diff will just show you the differences that the module will apply on the host. And here it's also good to know not all modules that are developed by Ansible or the community are have the check or the diff mode. So you have to use the documentation to check if the check and diff mode is available for that module. But most of the built-in modules do have the check and diff mode. And in the daily work, it can be something like that. I will just make a short example. I think, I have here a task that should always change because I use as content, I use my timestamp. So it's always should be a state, a change. So if I run my playbook with the check, you see here, okay, I've got some task that would be okay, and here the copy file would be changed, but because I use the check mode, nothing has changed on that file. I can show you that. So here the content is from my demo at home. Here I tested the playbook, and so the timestamp is not from now, and I can now add the diff mode. So I will see what would change in that file. Here you see my demo of after the launch will be deleted, and the timestamp from right now will be added to the file. And if I now remove the check, Ansible will also execute that. And here now I have the change in my file. Then the next thing I want to talk about is about facts. I think all of you already used some facts in a task or in a role. And what I want to show you is now how you can create a custom fact. So that means that maybe you have an application or some customer-based information that you don't have as a fact, and you want that to use it in your playbook or in your role. So you can add a custom fact that will be collected by Ansible before the run of the playbook will start, and then you have the fact available in your task and role and can use it. What you have to do for that is quite simple. You can use the default fact path. I think it's etc Ansible. I don't know exactly what it is, but here I have created an own fact path, and here I have 3 files. It's quite important to use the suffix .fact, otherwise Ansible will not collect the fact, and the content have to be an ini file, a JSON, or an execute table which generates a JSON output. So Ansible can collect that. And here I have three facts. One is a static one. Here it's a bash script that outputs my cluster based on an echo. That's quite simple. So here I have a fact available afterwards that's called cluster with the value yes. Then I have a static fact which is in a ini format, and I have a dynamic fact who runs a command on a host. That could be everything. It could be a query for the RPM database. It could be a query of a command or whatever you want. So you can use that as a fact. And then I can use that fact in my playbook. Here I just output all my local facts. The variable it's a predefined variable, Ansible local. So this one will show me all local facts, and then if I want to use a defined variable, I can just use the dict to output my predefined fact. So I will run my playbook. And here, oh, my scroll is a bit... I don't know what's wrong with my scroll right now. So here, these are all the facts that Ansible collected for me. So you see the structure with my cluster, that's the file name. So the file name is the namespace, or how you want to call it, in your Ansible local variable. And then I have the other file Pascal with the init structure, general, foo, and meetup as key value, and my script that is executed in my whoami fact. And here Pascal is my user that was returned by the whoami command. And here I just make some outputs of that collected facts. So here I use the foo value with the content, my foo key, and get the bar as value. And here the same for my cluster and my user as variable. That can be quite useful. For example, if you want to know before something is run on your playbook, you don't have to define it, so you can collect it from the host and get the information in your roles or tasks and use it. Yeah, okay. Then the next thing about facts is delegated facts. That can be something that's useful if you need information of another host to use it in a playbook or in a task. For example, if you have a front end and a back end, and you need the IP address of the back end for the entry in your file host or in your application in the front end. So you can collect the IP address of the other hosts and use that variable in your playbook. And here I have, just to show you, that's also possible. You can just run a playbook on a host or a host group and gather the facts with no tasks. So that's just a play to get the facts of another host. That's one way how you can do it. And then here I have the play available on my other host, my lab 1 host, and here I show the host vars of my lab 2. I hope that's that's clear how I mean that. And then I have the other option if I need facts not in the beginning, or for example I have a playbook that I need the fact in a special order, so I can use the setup module to collect the facts and delegate them to an host or also an host group. So here I delegate it to my group. It's my group with 1 host. That makes no sense, but just to show you, you can delegate it to a host or a list of hosts or a defined host group and use the first node of that group, for example. That's also possible. You can combine it however you want. And then you can output the delegated fact with the host vars. Here I used my selection of the group 2 and output my Ansible default IPv4 address of that host. And if I run my playbook, great. Here in the beginning I have the first run. That's all the facts of my lab 2. That was the first play. And here I have an error in my second one. Here you see the task that I run on my lab 1. I delegate the setup module to lab 3 to get the facts, and the same for lab 4. And here I have an undefined error, has no attribute, okay, address. Maybe I just find the error, and otherwise you have to believe me that it still works. it should work. So I make that. So yeah, here I have the error, but here you see that's the fact of all the other hosts that I am collected with my delegated Ansible setup module. Ah, because I'm not connected. Okay, maybe. Maybe I'm lucky now. Yeah. No. Thanks, Magnus, for the hint. Yeah. Okay, here now I have an IP4 IP address I can use and collect. And yeah, you see lab 3 and 4 are the same. It's my host, so it's the same IP, but in the a use case, you would have the IP address of all your hosts here. I don't know what's the time or when did I start? 7 minutes. Yeah, that's really right. Yeah, that was it about facts. The next one I can make it a bit faster with Jinja. I think all of you know that Jinja is the template engine that is used in Ansible. And with Jinja, there are many useful filters and other options that you can use. You don't have to. You can also use the Jinja documentation to get more information about the Jinja possibilities. And here I just want to show you 4 simple filters that are also documented in the Ansible documentation. So I put the link here. One of them is the join. I think all of you know join. It's possible to use it to concat a list into a string. Here I have a list with 4 items. Then I have a debug task where I join my list with a delimiter of a comma. So here you see that is my list joined with a comma as delimiter. If you don't use a delimiter, it's I think it's a space, so it will be concatenated with a space. That can be useful. Another Jinja filter is comment. With comment, you can add your value that you have in your variable, put in a comment in a special way. For example, XML has another documentation standard to documentate something inside your XML file. So you can comment and use the interpreter, for example, XML, or you can also use another or a known decoration as comment. And that can be, that's the output here. So you see, this is my comment, is my variable, and Ansible put, with the Jinja filter, put the syntax for the comments in XML. That can be useful also for PHP files or something like that. There are different, or C, there are different documentation filters available. In the use case could be, I think, sudo or Vim has another comment style. So you have to use decoration, for example, another sign, and you can define it here in your code to use it as comment. And that here I use it as a debug, but the idea is to use it in a template. I think makes sense. Then another useful part, I think, is now. Now can be used as to get the timestamp from right now, and you can also format it. And the useful part about this is you don't need the facts. You could also use the gathered facts of a host to use it as a timestamp, but sometimes you don't want to get the facts only to have the timestamp from right now. So you can use now to get the time right now. And the output is here. It's I already formatted it here with the defined serve time. And if I don't use if I don't format it, I have just a simple output or the default output of my timestamp. And then the last one, I needed that filter, for example, with AI, with Tower, you have a predefined variable how the URL of the tower, or on which URL the tower is running, and we used that to get the host name of the full qualified name of the host. And for that, you have the URL split filter. So here I have a URL with a username, password, and the full qualified domain name, a special port, options, and so on. And the URL split will split the whole URL into fragments like hostname, netlog, password, path, port, query, scheme, and username. That can be useful to just use it inside a task if you have an URL and just need the hostname, for example. Yep. How many minutes left? Sorry.
This is fun.
Okay, I hope so. The next one, I want to show you some examples with the file or with the file modules like template or copy. And here are some useful parameters or arguments that you can use. I've prepared something here. Some of you already saw it in the presentation of Andrin. I think he also used the content parameter for the copy module. With that, you don't have to create a file. You can just use content and use that as your source for the copy module as file content. And you can also use a variable, and here I can combine something. For example, if I have a variable or a dict, that's another useful filter, for example, to YAML. So here I have to define my variable. Yeah, I've just created a small dict with the two key value pairs, hello Ansible and foo bar. And here in my copy, I just use now the variable, myvar, and I want to have it in a quite readable YAML format, so I just run my playbook. And here my content is defined as YAML. You can also define the two YAML can also have options like the separator. If you want to have two spaces and so on, you can customize it how you like it. Or there is also the toJSON filter that will create the file as JSON. Yeah, can also be quite useful to combine it like that. Another option in the copy on template module is no-log. No-log can be used if you have sensitive data in your content or in your template. So if I don't set no-log, and I use the diff mode, then you see here the output of my very special secret with my timestamp. That's just an example, but you will see the secret, and if you add the no-log option to the module, you only see that the file would be changed, but don't see the output of the command or the task. Then the next one is the force option. Force option can be used, for example, I have a customer that manages some agents, and the agents are to run the agent, you have an initial configuration file, and afterwards the agent will manage the file by itself or by the connected computer, by the connected server. And so with the force mode, you can just manage the initial file, and afterwards, if the file is there, Ansible will not change something on that file again. So I have an example here. I have a file with a content. I don't know what I have done here. With a content, and if I run the playbook, or you see it here, Ansible will not touch the file. I can change the file. I think I know what I've done. Here, I change the content, and Ansible will not change something on that file. Here. So the content is still the same, but if I delete the file and run my playbook again, so now it's not available, Ansible will put the file in place with my content. And afterwards, I can change the content, and Ansible will not do something on that file again. Yeah. Yep. Yeah. And then the last one is the backup option. With backup, Ansible will, if something changes in that file, Ansible will create a backup file of that file. So here I have an example. So if I change that file and run play Ansible, so the task changed the file, and now Ansible also created a copy of the old file, so you have a backup of the already existing file on your file system. I have too many examples. Maybe I have to break down it a bit. Something also useful. I just make it quick, I hope. Another useful option is the validate option that you can use in template and copy module. Here you can, for example, if you have a Apache configuration or a sudo file that you manage with Ansible, you can use a command, a validate command, to make sure the file that you copy on the managed host is valid for that sudo or for that Apache configuration. And here are some examples how you can use that validate command. Here with vi sudo, I have to check the file if it's valid, and only if it's valid the file will be copied on the managed host. Otherwise, Ansible will get an error and will not change something on your system, so you will not break the system. And it's also possible to have a customized validate command. So here I just use a grep and just look if Pascal is contained in my copied file. And if not, Ansible will not do something on that system. And yeah, a good example is SHD configuration files, Apache, vi sudo, or whatever. And then the last one with the file example is the assemble module. Maybe Linux Fabric, I'm not sure. Maybe it's something that you can use to get away of the raw modules, of the raw modules. With Ansible, with assemble, you can put fragments together into one file. So I think it's the best if I show you that. So here I use the assemble module. Say my source is a configuration directory that contains fragments of files, and my destination is a combined content of all the fragments in a file. For example, here I have a sample. Okay. Here I have an example of a configuration directory which contains a match rule. It's just an example. And then if I run my playbook, Ansible will, I have to check my path. Ansible will create a generated file based on my content of that configuration directories. So if here I match 2, hello Ansible Meetup, I run it again. Here you see the diff option is not available. But the generated file contains all of the fragments. And you can also use fragments or headers in the assemble module to have the file splitted or with a comment or whatever you want. Yeah. I think the last one I will not show, it's in the slides. I have other examples. For example, the verbose mode of the debug module. So you can define your own, or you can add your debug modules, debug tasks in your task and use a verbosity level so that the debug will only show if you use a debug mode in the, oh wait, it's too complicated to. Yeah, here I have a verbosity set with 2, so the task will only run if I put 2 V's. So here I will see it, and if I don't use the option, the task is skipped. That's the verbosity. Then that's your time, not mine. The debug module. Yeah, you can also put it here, but you can define a default. Yeah.
Do you use the when clause for other modules? Do you think?
Sometimes, yeah. I also use when, but I want to don't mix it up with the when condition right now. So, and I think the last one, or maybe almost the last one, is sorry. Yeah, here is that the default callback plugin of Ansible has some variables. For example, Ansible display. I have display skipped hosts gleich no, and Ansible display okay hosts gleich no, Ansible playbook site YAML. With these 2 environment variables, Ansible will not display my tasks that are okay and will not display all my tasks that are skipped. So that could be useful in a pipeline. If you have a pipeline where you run all your stuff and import different playbooks, you have a big output in your pipeline. And in the most use cases, you only want to have the failed or maybe the skipped host. And so you can define the environment variables to skip some output. Yeah, and then role skeleton. If you have a nice README like Linux Fabric in your roles, you can use role skeleton, so you can define a skeleton for your role. Here I just put some tasks and a README and a default file in my role, and then I can use that skeleton to use it with Ansible Galaxy to create or generate a role based on my skeleton. So the role that I generate is always the same with the same README template and so on. That can be also used, I think, for collections. So yeah, and the command is with Ansible Galaxy in it, and then you add your role skeleton option. Role skeleton. So the meetup role is created, and here I have my skeleton, my used skeleton in the role. Quite simple. Last, okay. One more, okay. So well, the last one is, sorry, the last one is module defaults. For example, if you have something to do with Azure or other modules that always have the same options that you have to use in that module, you can define module defaults for that. Here I have a simple playbook. I put a default for my copy module and set my mode. My default mode is here defined, and if I don't, if I don't set the mode for a task, it uses the default. And here I can define that for other modules. For example, here if I have a so for example, if you have an Apache role or an Apache playbook, you always want to have the same user and group for the template or the copy module. You can define a default, and then it's the same for the whole playbook. So now I'm done.
Online viewers. That's, I guess, the only one we will
I think it's René.
take, and then we can continue on the APRO.
It isn't René, it's SU. I don't know who's SU. So
Yeah.
the question is, how do you get nicely colored Ansible output on the console?
Output. I think you can explain it better. I have it from you. I think it's ZSH. Or not?
So I think if your terminal supports colors, Ansible should output it in colors, and the rest of it is ZSH with oh my ZSH, basically.
Yep.
Yeah.
There's a nice blog post in the confirm blog, so yeah, just have a look there. It's all documented.
Great, thank you very much. Again, questions?
There's no time for questions.
Are you hungry? Oh yeah, there's a question.
There are also module default groups. When you, for example, for cloud modules, for AWS or so, or for Azure,
Yep.
you find module defaults which apply to all the Azure modules.
Good input, yep.
Very useful.
Yep. And maybe module defaults, you cannot use it in roles, but you can use it in blocks. So you put a block into your role, and then you have module defaults. Yeah.
All right. Are you hungry? Yeah. So let's go. Yeah, we can all go downstairs. Food, catering, drinks are there. So yeah, enjoy. Thank you very much.